I don't know how we did it this morning, but we're going to do it again next week because we actually got all of that done earlier than usual. You'll have a longer meditation next week. No, that's not what I'm saying. So I want to read to you from the Gospel of John, the 11th chapter, some words that are framing my remarks and my sermon to you today. We're going to start in verse 17, and this is not the typical resurrection story, just so you know, and I know it, and if you come up and tell me afterwards that that wasn't the resurrection story, I'll say I know. But you still need to hear this story. For 6 weeks now, this is the 7th week in our series on what's in a name, and each week for the last 5 weeks we've talked about different names that Jesus identified him as, such names as I am the Good Shepherd, and they were all based in the words from Moses. When Moses asked God for a name, God said to Moses, "Tell the people that I am sent you." Now, in English, that seems like kind of an odd name, I am. But it's one of those words that has lots of meanings in Hebrew. And here's what I'm going to tell you. It has 3 tenses. It is the word I am, but it's also I was and I will be. So what God said to Moses is, tell the people that the God who was from the beginning and will be to the very end is my name. And the people understood that. And so then Jesus comes, and in the Gospel of John, John records 7 or 8 different instances where Jesus uses the same words to describe himself. Things like, I am the Good Shepherd. I am the door. That was kind of my favorite one because it's so weird. And today is no different. He gives us a name. He tells his disciples in a weird setting, I am the resurrection and the life. Now you understand why this text is important on Easter Sunday. I am the resurrection. I was the resurrection. I will be. Say will be, please. Will be. Thank you. I thought you might have dropped off to sleep because it's late on this day. Anyway, listen to these words from the Gospel of John. It says in verse 17, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already died. What you don't know is that Lazarus died. Now you know. Lazarus died. They had called Jesus and said, come save him, Lord. Come do that thing you do, because he heals the blind men, he heals the lame men, he raises people from the dead, but they really don't want it to go that far. So Jesus says he's not really going to die. And of course he waits. And what do you think Lazarus did? He died. Just kind of crazy.
But it's never too late.
But it's never too late. That's what Jesus says. So, here, listen to this. He says, now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and Jews had come to see Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sister, to comfort them in the loss of their brother Lazarus. Now when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. Now Martha was the busybody of the 2 sisters. She was the one that I was always doing. She was always cooking, always cleaning, always this, always that. She never sat down for anything, and she just kept going like the Energizer Bunny. I love to work the Energizer Bunny into a sermon on Easter. I thought you would appreciate that. Some of you, anyway. Lord, Martha says to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask, because she knows that Jesus in the past has raised people from the dead. So she wasn't really worried. She was a little sad that her brother had died, but she knew that Jesus could do it. And Jesus says, your brother will rise again. And And Martha says, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus said to her these magic words, I am the resurrection and the life. Even the one who believes in me will live even though they die. Now that's a whole new concept. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Now, if you're just hearing this for the first time and you're going, I'll never die if I believe in Jesus. Well, I believe in Jesus because we want to live forever. But Jake's right. Most of us really don't want to live forever. Not at least in the bodies we're in now. At least not in the situation we're in now. Not in the world we are in now. But Jesus says, whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And then he does something really strange. Well, it wasn't really strange for him. He asked a question. Oh, that won't tell me what the question was. I actually know what the question is, but I'd like to have a follow-up. He looks at Martha and says, do you believe this? Whew! Let me tell you something. Martha said yes. It's a good answer. But it is the question of all questions. It is the question that every single believer in Jesus has to ask every single day. When you woke up this morning, maybe you didn't have it written on your wall. I kind of encourage you to put it on your mirror and write on my box marker, do I believe? It's a great reminder. How many of you have ever woken up, went in, looked at the mirror, and went, ugh? Come on. Some of you aren't telling the truth. How many of you? 5 a.m. this morning. I got that message. Just so you know, I am not in charge of the sunrise service time pick. God is. You see, Jesus understood a couple of things. He understood that death comes in two ways. You can die spiritually, or you can die physically. Jesus understood the physical death. He had had friends die. He knew people died. He had raised people back from the dead. You know, I love it when the Jews said, oh, they weren't really dead. You know, my favorite is the story of Lazarus. Lazarus wasn't really dead. They just put him in the tomb for 4 days and sealed it. No air in, no air out, but he wasn't really dead. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Even then, they knew when someone was dead. So Jesus finishes the story. He says to Martha, do you believe this? And she says, yes, Lord, I believe it. And so he says, show me where you buried him. And, you know, Mary and Martha, they're all up in arms. You ever open the grave of a man dead for 4 days? No.
He stinks.
In the King James Version, it says, he stinketh. However you want to imagine, he smelled bad. Deodorant wasn't going to work. He says, roll back the tomb. They complain, don't do it, Lord. We don't need the smell. We don't want to have to clean up after it. Jesus says, push it back. And they do. Because for some reason, when Jesus said something to do, people did it. That's a clue to life.
That's what we do now.
Yeah. So they push the tomb back. They roll the stone back. Jesus prays. He says, Lord, I don't know what you're going to do, but I know what I would like to do, Lord. Could you let Lazarus go out? And then he does an amazing thing. He looks into that tomb and he says, Lazarus! And I think it's one of the few times Jesus really raised his voice. He says, Lazarus, come out of that tomb! Can you imagine the drum roll? Yeah. And he stumbles out. Well, they didn't think it through clearly. actually says he stumbled out of the tomb. He stumbled out of the tomb because he was wrapped up in grave cloth like a mummy. If you don't know what that's like, get one of your kids, wrap them up like a mummy, and lay them down and say, come out of the tomb, and see if they can actually get out. Or you could be really brave and have your kids wrap you up, but they're not going to call you out of the tomb.
And they're not gonna help you get out.
Anyway, Lazarus, come out. And there's this stumbling around. You could hear it. And he walks out to the amazement of the people. And I think to the amazement of all the people except for Mary and Martha. I think the disciples who were there were amazed. They didn't know what was going to happen. They weren't privy to the conversation between Mary and Martha, except maybe John, the Apostle John, because he records it for us, so we know this story. So, the crisis is, we all die. How many of you knew that? That's the crisis in this story. The cure is Jesus. Do you believe in me? The question, do you believe? He asked us the same question. Do you believe? Now, I know that most of the people in this room, in their heads, said, I wish he'd quit asking that. We've already answered it 17 times. Do you believe? But the problem was, you all answered it, except for a few of you, answered it in your heads. Do you know what the problem with that is? Sometimes your ears don't listen to your heads. Honest. If you have children, you know that. Jesus says, do you believe this? You watched the baptism. You watched Finley get baptized. Do you know what she said? She said yes. She said yes last week. She said yes this week. She'll say yes next week. Why do I know that? Because I think that was a special little girl who's got a connection with the Holy. And if you don't believe me, talk to her. Spend some time listening to her. Here's what other thing I'm going to tell you. Almost every one of those kids that you saw up there on that stage, they are in various spaces of belief already. They're growing. Just like you and I and the rest of the world. They're learning about what Jesus did for them. And the reality is, Jesus did one thing, and Crystal said it so well. Crystal came, he lived, he breathed, he worked, he served, all so you could believe. All so you could feel his love. All so you could understand what he was willing to do for you. If you all had mirrors in your pocket, I'd say take out a mirror. Take a good look. Yeah, that's the person. Jesus died for you. Jesus lived for you. Jesus was resurrected for you. And it's because we call on a specific name. Because remember that name that we told you about at the beginning? The name of Jesus claimed, I am the resurrection and the life. I was the resurrection and the life. And I will be the resurrection of life. It's for you. Say me.
Me.
Now look at yourself and say me.
Me.
I know that was a hard thing for you. That's the message of Easter. Jesus came, he lived, he died, and he was raised for you. And the person sitting next to you, the person you're going to meet at the grocery store, the person that's going to drive you crazy, the person who's going to make you mad, the person who's going to love you. That's why Jesus comes. Because he is the resurrection